Thank you very much for that, Eric. I have with me this afternoon two scholars who've been doing some really interesting work at an unusual intersection. You know, the title of Ta-Nehisi's cover story was The State of the Black Family in the Age of Mass Incarceration. And so we're going to talk a little bit about family for a second. A quick question to the room before I introduce my co-panelists. How many of you all have ever had a parent arrested, imprisoned, or jailed? One of the themes of this conversation, I have here to my right student Talia Thomas, who is a senior at Howard University. She's a double major in criminology and sociology. I have Professor Bahiyyah Muhammad, who is an assistant professor of sociology at Howard as well. So Professor Muhammad has led a very interesting class that Talia was a student in. Describe what this program that you created at Howard looks like.
So this program looks really unique. What we do is we structure classes along with real life experience. And so as part of my criminal justice class, I require students to live at a prison for 7 full days as part of my course curriculum. That particular experience is just not out of the norm. The students are structured behind reading numerous things that govern and prepare them for this particular experience. But it's our way of allowing real life experiences to kind of merge with what we're reading and talking about in the classes. Let's
actually take a minute and look at the cots that the students sleep on in the women's prison that they go to during spring break. What does the classroom look like? Can we see a photo of the classroom itself? So, on your spring break, Talia, your alternative spring break, you went to a women's prison and spent the week living in this prison. My understanding is that you were not completely sold on the idea of spending a week in prison at the outset of this program.
Yes, most definitely. As a student of criminology, of Dr. Muhammad's wonderful instruction, I was more focused on, crime theories and things of that nature. So when the class was, I guess you'd say, presented to me, I immediately thought, what can I tell a parent about how to be a parent? I'm still a child. I'm pretty much, still under my own parents' supervision. So, what advice could I offer them on how to be better parents, outside of their current situation? And it took me a while to realize that, it wasn't even about any of that. It was more about service. That's what, alternative spring break is. It's about service and, taking time out of your own life to, just be a listening ear or, a kind friend to somebody who may not have that option around them as often as they'd like to.
So I polled the room about how many folks that had an experience with their own parents intersecting with the prison system. One of the things that I think we hear often in this conversation is that there's actually a pretty stark divide between communities that are heavily policed, where intersections with prison, with jail, with police are ordinary, routine, in some places constant, and a whole other universe, a set of communities where people do not have very many intersections with, say, a women's prison other than Orange is the New Black. Talia, had you ever been to a prison before?
No, I had never been to a prison before, and in fact, I don't have any relatives who have ever been incarcerated, and it's just never been my experience. So that was another reason why I was also very apprehensive. I really didn't know what I could offer the situation.
How do you, Professor Muhammad, how do you sort of ground your students in the experience of going to this prison? How do you prepare them? What do you tell them? What do you ask them to look for when they meet the mothers and the students who will be joining them from the prison?
Well, the class is completely structured around this idea of mass incarceration. So in order to communicate during incarceration, we have calls we have mail and we have visits. And so I structured the entire class that way. Throughout the semester, I had students calling in to the correctional facility and having conversations about a lecture over the phone so that they could see the frustration, so that they could see the time limitations, so that they could see how important every single word is. And then I saturated them with a lot of different exciting and engaging readings like Orange is the New Black. We looked at some of the episodes, we read the books, we also read Upper Bunkies Unite, a lot of different readings in order for them to kind of have a vision in their mind before going to the facility. It was kind of like a culture shock, but I feel if you're going to have a degree in this area, if you're going to want to fight for social justice, you need to see how it plays itself out realistically.
So another quick poll of the room. How many of y'all have seen Orange is the New Black? Many, many more. What does it get right? What does it get wrong? So you watch this as part of the class. How did your experience of the prison differ from this fictional one that many more of us have had access to?
Well, as we all know, the reality is very different from what's portrayed on TV. It's not a bunch of, fun and games. The women aren't all, no, I wouldn't say anybody's ever really happy to be there. So, it's not a comedy. It's real life. They do really miss their children. They do really miss, the lives they once had. So that was the biggest difference. Outside of that, everything was pretty much spot on. The women at this particular facility were able to move, a little bit more freely. It was a minimum security facility. So, you did still see that aspect. The clothing was pretty much the same. And, it was like living, Orange is the New Black from the outside looking in.
Yeah. Professor Muhammad, you had done, as part of your dissertation research in 2011, you actually interviewed more than 100 children of parents who had been incarcerated. What is that? How does a parent talk to their child, and what sort of guidance do you offer to parents who are in prison to speak to their child about this experience?
I would definitely say to just speak. One of the things that I identified going in as a young researcher was that a lot of the families had dealt with many years of incarceration, but had never talked about it. For the first time in maybe 10 or 15 years, they were sitting down with a stranger who's this researcher coming in, and they're crying and upset and frustrated as they grapple with this narrative that they're sharing with me. But at the end of the conversation, they talked about how empowering it felt and how really good it felt. So I would start by saying, just tell the truth. The children are ready for that. I've interviewed children from 17 years old all the way down to 7, and they really want to know. I remember specifically this one young male. I interviewed them in their bedrooms with the doors closed. And so I remember when it was his turn for the interview, he closed the door behind me immediately, and he just started to cry, and he was basically saying, don't I deserve it? Don't I deserve the respect to be told the truth? I know my dad is not in boot camp because my cousin comes home on winter break and during Christmas. And he was really upset and frustrated, and I tried my best as a researcher to explain to him that it's out of protection. A lot of the grandmothers that I interviewed talked about not sharing the information because they didn't know where to start. They didn't know how to explain it. They felt that maybe they would be opening Pandora's box, and maybe there would be questions later on that they could not answer.
So you developed a resource for parents. Let's take a look at the coloring book, at a couple of pages of the book that Professor Muhammad created. Why this approach? Who is this for, and why?
This is for everybody. This is for the elder grandparents who don't know where to start. This is for the younger kids.
And I should say, the book is the prison alphabet. It's a coloring book. It actually doesn't arrive, as I understand it, with all the images colored in.
Yes, there's 2 versions. So the first version is the prison alphabet, an educational coloring book for children of incarcerated parents, and then there's a picture book if you want to read it in communities that are plagued by mass incarceration, which I've done over the years, going into the schools. Although the teachers aren't talking about it, we know that large numbers of students are affected by it, so it allows the conversation to just start there, and you can just read it. The coloring book is for individuals who want to engage and interact with the child, and so I thought, what better things do children like to do than to, color? So let's have the conversation, but in a child-friendly way. And so for those grandmothers or caregivers who don't know where to start, you could have the coloring book placed on the bed with a box of crayons, and that's just the start of the conversation.
You mentioned, and as I imagine, that one of the emotions that the children have to deal with as they come to grips with where their parents are and the experience their parents have gone through is stigma. Stigma that attaches to themselves, not just to their parents. When we talk about incarceration, one of the intended societal effects of incarceration in many respects is stigma. But how do you help a child sort of process how they should react to that stigma? Should they feel stigmatized?
Well, I travel all around the country, and I have Project Iron Kids, which is an initiative to empower children of incarcerated parents of all different nations. And so I've been in Africa, Asia, Dubai, the Middle East, all over to tell them, you are awesome and you are amazing. It's okay to have a parent in prison and still love them. 90% of the children that I interviewed said, I want a lifelong relationship with my parent. I love my mom. It kills me that my sister speaks about her in this way, but I live here. And so this is where I want to be. I tell the children to accept their story and accept their narrative. A lot of the children that I interviewed who were white children were empowered because they talked about their stories often. In their rooms on bookshelves, there were books that talked about parental incarceration. And therefore, that's why I created a book that allowed some of the children to be of the same complexion and to educate them. Those children felt empowered because they were able to say, when I'm 18 and I'm graduating, my dad will be home from prison. It was like they were able to map out their lives. And so I work with children and with families to help them to see their life outside of incarceration, that they have done nothing, that they are the innocent individuals. And more importantly, I highlight success stories. We talk about the effects on children of incarcerated parents all the way to the point where we're looking at death. We're looking at children and having a less life expectancy. But we don't know anything about success. We don't know anything about resiliency. And I feel that we could learn a lot from those examples. And so I've been doing a lot of studies now where I'm following children who were born in prison, but now they have PhDs, they have JDs, they're attending Harvard. A lot of the students are my students who are cum laude and are quiet about it because why would you share it if there's no positive side to it? And then you'll be stigmatized in that sense.
So really quickly, because this is part of your curriculum and you've instructed people in it, and feel free to chime in, Talia, what's the one thing, if say, we were to go to women's prison tomorrow, what would you want us to look for? How would you instruct us to look? What would you want us to see from that experience?
I would want you to shed everything that you've seen on the media, everything that you've read about in newspapers, in articles, in peer-reviewed journals, and really see it from the eyes of a child. See it in its innocent nature. See it through its purity. See it for what it really is. See love. See laughter. Those things happen there every day, but we're stigmatized too by the things that we read, by the things that we write, by the pressures of the academy and of society. And therefore, I tell the students all the time when they go in, use your 5 senses. They're like, wait, are you kidding me? 5 senses? Yes. What do you smell? What does it feel like? What are you seeing? What are you hearing? That's on the level of the child, and I think that that particular level is beyond some of the places where we are as adults.
Thank you very much, Bahiyyah. Thank you very much, Talia.
Thank you.